Longtime representative for District 86 is calling it a career in Austin. Representative John Smithee joining us today. He has been advocating for the people of the 86th District for 4 decades. He joins us in studio. Representative Smithee, glad to have you. I'm not going to lie to you. When I opened that press release from Wendy Finney, I figured it was coming. I wasn't quite sure. What was it about now? How was that decision made?
Well, everyone always told me that when it's time, you'll know it's time.
Yeah.
And that was certainly the case. I had originally discussed with my family that I would leave 4 years ago.
Yeah.
But there's always something to bring you back, some project you're working on. 4 years ago, we were, Representative Price and I were working on trying to get the funding for the new mental hospital in Amarillo, which we were successful, and it's under construction now. Last session, it was there was kind of a time of turmoil in the Texas House, and there were a lot of issues we were working on. We wanted to make sure that we got the funding secured for the hospital, and the other thing was that the other representative from Amarillo, Representative Ford Price, was leaving. And it just didn't seem like a good time for both representatives to leave on the same session. So it's always, there's never been a good time, but finally it looked like it was time to go.
I remember when Ford Price was getting ready to announce. I got a text message from his wife, and she said, "Big news today," and I was like, "Oh no, here we go." So the big news today is after 4 decades, you're calling it a career. What do you, when you look back on that time, Representative Smithee, what were some of those landmark legislative moments for you? Well,
the greatest satisfaction you get is from working with other people to get things done. And, we did a lot of really good things for Amarillo and for the Panhandle area. But as I look back, none of those were done by me or even by me and other legislators. Everything was a community project. We had a lot of community buy-in, community work that went into it. I look back, one of the first bills I worked on was bringing 911 service to the Panhandle, to Amarillo particularly, and then later to the Panhandle. And that was a community effort at the time. Later we did the merger of West Texas State into the Texas A&M system, which became West Texas A&M.
I was at WT during that time. I was there in that transition. In fact, you may not remember this, but we came down, there was a group of WT students that we came down, and we were fighting to keep the West Texas a part of it. I think they wanted to do, I think it was Texas A&M at Canyon.
They were talking about different names.
Yeah, different names, but we went down, there was a group of students and I that went down and fought to keep West Texas. We liked that West Texas name in there.
Well, the students made the difference. And that was incredible because, when we passed the merger bill, it was done subject to approval by the coordinating board. And so we got to the coordinating board, and going into that meeting, we didn't have the votes. We had counted votes. We were 1 or 2 votes short. And we were generally feeling like it wasn't going to go well. Well, a busload of students from West Texas State at the time shows up in Austin at the coordinating board meeting, and they got up and they talked about how important it was to them to have a quality education right here in the Texas Panhandle. And it was a very emotional presentation by the students. And I'm convinced to this day that the students are the ones that turn the votes. In fact, the members of the board that we thought were going to vote against us that ended up voting for us told us the students made the difference. So it was pretty incredible.
Wow. Well, I remember those days of getting on the bus and going from WT down to Austin and to do that stuff. You were mentioning kind of first going there. So what made you, all those years ago, this would have been, I think you chose to run, was it 84?
84 when I ran, and 85 sworn in.
Sworn in January of 85. What was it, Representative Smithee, that called you into that public service? You were a successful attorney here in town. You had that going for you. What made you want to do that?
Well, at the time, I had been married a few years. We had one daughter who was 2 years old. My wife was expecting another. And I told her just this last week, I said, I can't believe I did that to you at the time. That was a terrible thing to do.
What did Becky say to that?
Well, she said, I thought so. But, she never complained. All these years, she's made her schedule work around mine in Austin. And I told her, this week, that's a debt that I can never repay,
Yeah.
And I was young. I didn't really realize the impact of what I was doing to her, but she responded and she she took care of the family and was always there when I came back from Austin. And literally, it's a debt I can never repay. But I was very interested in Texas politics and Texas government. And, there was an open seat here. Representative Bob Simpson had decided not to run again. And it seemed like an opportunity to run at the time. And it was a good opportunity. And I've never regretted having gotten into the legislature and doing the work that we've done over the years.
There wasn't one day in all that where you were thinking to yourself, what did I get myself into?
Well, that was my first thought once I got sworn in Austin, because I literally had no idea what I was doing. I had never really been around the Capitol, around the legislature that much. And so I got in, and, first of all, when you win, you realize, now what am I into? And so it was a learning experience for sure. And so, at the very first, there were some questions, do I really know what I'm getting into here? But it worked out.
So back in that was Speaker, was it the House Speaker, was that Pete Laney at the time?
Gib Lewis was the Speaker
Gib
at
Lewis.
that time, yeah.
And so the politics in Austin has changed quite a bit over those 40 years. Tell us about that.
Well, things have changed. Two things that I always tell people that have changed. One is we had no cell phones, and so you had pay phone booths everywhere around the Capitol. The other thing, no computers. There was not a computer in the Capitol building when I first got there. The first computer came 2 or 3 years later, and it was a computer that took up almost a whole room that they brought in for redistricting in 1990. But today, consequently, everything was on paper. Bills were printed on paper. Every calendar's on paper. In today's world, all that's electronic, and so that's changed a lot. But the politics has changed a lot too. When I first got there, the legislature was dominated by Democrats, but many of those Democrats were very conservative, rural Democrats. And so even though I was a Republican, I was a member of the minority party, on a lot of the issues, I felt like I was in the majority because there was a coalition of the Republicans and the conservative Democrats. Of course, that's changed over the years. There are no more conservative Democrats left in the Texas Capitol, but it's a majority Republicans now. But the other thing that I think is really regrettable is how divisive politics has become. When I first got there, I think much more so than now, we worked with pretty much everybody to try to do good things and do things we could agree on to make the state better. You see very little of that now. We're still congenial, across party lines, but there's this divide on issues and philosophy that has not really been a good thing. And of course, social media has just fueled that even more, and that was something we didn't have to deal with.
What's in terms of that political climate, do you ever see a chance? You've seen it. We're used to work hand in hand. It was statesmanship across the aisle. Do you see us ever being able to get back to that?
Well, I hope we can get back to it at some point. But the parties right now are so far apart, and even within the parties, you have these divides and these divisions within the parties, and so I don't know if the whole thing will ever turn again. They say there's nothing new in politics. Everything, you've seen everything before, it just comes around and goes back. So hopefully we get back to a little bit more civil environment.
But I think you're right with social media and the advent of 24 cable news, where there's stuff out there all the time. There's never a point where you feel like maybe that you can catch your breath. What has changed the most for the district, for 86, in those 40 years?
Well, the district itself has changed. When I first was sworn in, it was just Randall and Smith County. And so one of the really concerning things that has happened over the years has been, although this area has grown in population, we haven't grown nearly as quickly as the rest of the state. And so every 10 years when we do redistricting, the 86th district has to find another county or two to add. The districts get bigger, and so when I first got to Austin, we had five House members in the based in the Texas Panhandle. Today, there's only 3 of us, and one of those, Ken King, represents a portion of the Panhandle, but most of his district is outside the Panhandle.
Yeah.
So basically, it's Representative Fairley and I whose districts are pretty much solely in the Panhandle.
Yeah. What would you say to the person? I'm sure we're going to see a lot of names that are thrown out to replace you in Austin. What would you say to whoever it is that gets elected about the importance of representing these people?
Well, I tell them that there's an old saying, that all politics is local. That's nothing unique or different. But that's doubly true in the Texas Panhandle, because Texas can and always can take care of itself, always has taken care of itself. There's 149 other members of the legislature who are interested in taking care of Texas, but there's really nobody else there to take care of the Panhandle and its people. Besides the 3 of us that represent this district in the House, and the 1 senator that we share with the Permian Basin. And so if we're not doing our job to represent this area, then it's not going to get represented. And nobody else takes care of us. Nobody else makes sure we have roads or schools or anything else. So we have to do that, the ones of us that are representing this area. So when you represent the Panhandle of Texas, politics is all about the Panhandle of Texas.
What are you going to miss the most about making those trips to Austin?
Well, I won't miss a lot about making the trips, but I will say that the friendships and collegiality that you develop with legislators from around the state becomes a very big part of your life.
Yeah.
Those are friends that, I've got a number of friends in the Texas House. There's no doubt in my mind that, if I had had a serious illness or injury, those would have been the people that would have been in the hospital, with my family, making sure that I was okay. If you die, those are the people that'll be sitting on the front row at the funeral. They're good friends. So, I'll stay in touch with a lot of those individuals. A lot of them are leaving, a lot of people are leaving now. And so the friendships and the relationships, I think, are what I'll miss. What I won't miss are hours of seemingly endless and senseless debate, but I will miss the people.
What is in one of those? I think people don't understand the pressure that gets added to you guys during session, because it's pretty much nonstop.
Yeah.
Because it's an every 2-year thing, plus whatever extra sessions that you are called into. It's a lot of work and a lot of time condensed into a short amount of time.
And it's physically very taxing because, typically, it was not unusual for me to come home at 2 a.m. after a committee hearing. Mm-hmm. So I walk in at 2 a.m. to my apartment. I told my wife, I'm never doing this again, never doing this again. And then I have to get back out and into a committee hearing the next morning at 8 a.m. And so there's just no time left in there for sleep. Now, you can do that for a night or two, but when you do that over and over and over, for several weeks, it does begin to wear you down. And the other issue that develops is the dietary issue. We never take meal breaks. We just work straight through. So typically you eat something that's not very good for you, like potato chips or a grilled cheese sandwich or something.
Whatever's in the calf downstairs,
exactly.
Right? In the basement.
You eat it standing over a trash can, and you grab a bite as quick as you can, and then you throw it down, run back up, and make a vote, and then you come back and eat another bite. So, those things, like I say, can last for a day or two, but when you repeat them over and over, it's a very physically taxing situation.
Who are some of the closest friends that you would count among the closest friends that you made down in Austin that are lifelong, regardless of you being in Austin or not? You guys are going to be close throughout that.
Well, all I've had a great relationship with all the legislators from this area. Fort Price and I are still friends. We still talk from time to time, even though he no longer lives in Amarillo. We talk, and then had a great relationship with Senator Seliger. Of course, always had a great relationship with Senator Bivens, who passed away a number of years ago. But he was really a great guy to get to know and a great influence. Mm-hmm. And so, David Swinford, who passed away a couple of years ago, Warren Chisholm, who's still living. All of those have been great friends and continued to be friends after they left the legislature.
When I first met you, this is a throwback because I would have been across the street at Channel 7. I was a photographer.
Yep.
And we came down, and it was, I guess, a precursor to Panhandle days. We would spend, I know it was Shane Sumrow was a reporter, I was a photographer. It's when I met you and Warren Chisholm and David Swinford.
Yep.
We had great representation back there. Those are some names that I have not thought about in a minute.
Well, another one's Pete Laney. I think Pete was probably the first one who called me right after the announcement came out. And, Pete was our speaker and did a great job. I mean, those were great days for the Panhandle because people in Austin called us the Panhandle Mafia because we pretty much got whatever we wanted up here because we had the speaker and we had very influential people in the Senate. And so those were good days for the Panhandle. And, we've stayed great friends over the years and still visit periodically.
You were talking about the changes in terms of the district. What do you see? I mean, I feel like the news coming is just getting more rapid in terms of these big businesses coming in. And where do you see the future of the 86th district, the people that you've served? What are you hopeful about as we move into this next chapter?
Well, one of the key elements has always been jobs because what my goal and always has been that, we have some bright young people that are being raised in Amarillo right now. Some are kids, some are teenagers, some are young adults. It's a shame when we lose any of those young people to another area because they're very much a part of the Panhandle. I think a lot of them would like to stay in the Panhandle area, but sometimes they can't find a job or the kind of job they want. And so we've got to create not just jobs, but good jobs here in the Panhandle. And so we've got to be very creative. We have a lot of things that aren't going for us, but we have a lot of things that are going for us. But one of the several things that are critical always are. One is transportation. We got to have transportation. We got to have education, not just public schools, but access to good higher education here in the area. And we also have to have the availability of health care, not just in Amarillo, but in our rural areas as well. So those are the three things that we've really got to focus on getting it. And then we can focus on jobs and job creation to get to keep these young people here in the Panhandle and keep them productive and and challenging jobs.
We're from the news side of it. I feel like that we're in this unique transition with Fermi and the rest of all that. What did Becky, your wife, say when you finally walked in? And I know you guys were probably praying about it for a while. When you finally were like, "Yep."
Well, we had talked about it at length over the last few months, and basically what she had told me is, whatever you decide, I'm on board with, and you can't ask for more than that. Yeah. But she said, I'll be supportive of whatever you decide. She said, if you think you ought to stay, we'll stay. If you think you need to go, we'll go. Yeah. And so, I mean, she's been a real trooper through the whole thing.
Did you place a call to For Price? Because there's a line from Hamilton the musical where it's teach them how to say goodbye. Did you reach out to Ford and say, all right, how did you do it?
I actually did. Ford had called me very early on and told me he was going to do it, and I said, I hate you, Ford, for doing that. But I asked Ford. I said, what's it like? I said, how much have you regretted your decision? He said, and his response was, there are times when you miss something about the job, but he said, overall, I never regretted it. I still go back to one of the last conversations I ever had with Teal Bivens before he passed away, and he could barely speak. And what he told me, he said, the day I retired was one of the happiest days of my life. He said, I felt like a 500-pound ball had been lifted off my back.
Wow.
And of course, he left that job to be ambassador to Sweden. But I said, well, Teal, the difference is you were chair of Senate Finance when you left. I said, I don't have that ball on my back.
Yeah.
But it's still a relief not to have to deal with, there's a lot of pressures. A lot of people are depending on. Mm-hmm. We've got still are, to get things done for this area. A lot of people have problems with state government they need fixed. And so you're doing a lot of things for a lot of people, and you know, you want to do a good job. You want to perform.
Well, being on the appropriations committee for so long, that was a heavy weight. That, I mean,
Well, I've never been on appropriations.
Not appropriations.
But Teal had.
Yeah,
you know,
Teal had been, yeah.
Teal did all that, and he was chair, and that was a big job. That was like a job within a job.
So what does retirement look like for Representative Smithee now that you've decided you're not going to go through another campaign?
Well, I tell everybody I haven't retired. I've just quit. You know, but I've got another year to go before the term's up. But you know, when I first started being in the legislature, it was truly a part-time job. It was a citizen legislature. You know, everybody there had another job. It has, in the last 10 or 15 years, become really a full-time job. And so I'm also a lawyer. I have a full-time law practice. So for about the last 10 or 15 years, I've had 2 full-time jobs going at one time. And so, you know, people say, how do you do that? Well, I mean, you get up an hour earlier or you work an hour later. You know, you just have to balance it and try to get both jobs done. So I just tell people I'm losing one job, but I've still got my other job of practicing law, which I hope to do as long as I'm able, and I enjoy that. And but 2 full-time jobs kind of weigh you down after a while.
Absolutely. And I don't know if I've got a lot of friends who are attorneys here in town, Representative Smithee. I don't think I've ever heard of one of them talk about retirement. I think it's just with practicing law, you just do, right?
Well, the beautiful thing about practicing law is that as long as your mind's good, you know, physically you can practice law until an advanced age. And we've had several lawyers here over the years who've practiced well into their 80s and 90s. You know, it's not for everybody, but some like to stay engaged.
Well, what have you and Becky started making plans on? You know, again, not having to go through the campaign cycle, not having to make those trips to Austin. Have you guys set aside something where you're like, let's go do this?
Not yet. We'll probably have time to talk about that later. But it's so far, you know, we've been so busy with everything, just family, kids and grandkids and everything else, that we just really haven't even had time to look forward to anything else in the future.
So we still have time left. You said that so poignantly, there is still time left. You've got, what is it, a year left? It'll be January of next year.
A little over a year,
A little over a year. What do you want that year to look like?
Well, I've got one big goal for this coming year, and that is to first of all, get the Panhandle Plains Museum back open. That was such a shame that it was closed. So that's my first goal. Now, if that is not possible, I at least want to have a plan in place for getting it back open as quickly as possible. The museum is a big part of our heritage and our history here in the Texas Panhandle. It's a big thing for school children, especially it was for me when I went to school, of being able to go down and go through the museum. It's a very good learning experience. It puts young people in touch with their roots, basically, and teaches us about the values and the history of this area. So it still breaks my heart every time I drive by the museum and I see the sign out front that says we are temporarily closed. And so we've got to, and I know Dr. Wendler's devoted to getting this done, and you know, really everybody wants to get the museum open. We've got some safety issues we've got to deal with. You know, ultimately it comes down to money at some point.
Doesn't it always?
Yeah, but so we're going to have to find some way to get the museum back open as quickly as possible. Because I've told everybody, the longer the museum stays closed, the greater the odds that it won't open. And that's not an option. We've got to get the museum back. There's so many wonderful artifacts available in that museum. And like I say, it's part of our culture here.
How do we do that? Because I know in the educators that I've talked to and the people, I mean, we used to take our girls a couple of times a year. Yep. It's just something, and you said it right, it's our specific history and how strong the people who decided to settle in a very hard place.
Yes.
How do we do that? How do we get it back open?
Well, you know, like I said, it comes down to money, and money. And the problem that we've always had, it used to be part of the West Texas State College or University budget. Now it's part of the Texas A&M system. The funding mechanism for higher education in Texas is basically is basically designed not to fund things like museums because they become special items and it's almost impossible to get a special item. So there's a bias in the system against universities owning or running a museum. In fact, up to now, recently there's been 3 in the state of Texas, one at Sam Houston, which is closing permanently. And then there was West Texas A&M and also the Ranching Heritage Center at Texas Tech in Lubbock. And so the museums as part of universities are kind of a thing of the past. So we've got basically to decide the path forward, whether the museum stays as part of the Texas A&M University system, or if not, where it goes. It's probably got to have some organization to lead it. We've looked at there's other options we're looking at. It's not like we're choosing options, we're just trying to find an option. But we'll find a way to keep the museum open. And so that I think we'll be exploring that over the next month or two. Meeting with the local board here and with local citizens and trying to find a way forward that is good for the museum and good for our area. But we'll get it done. We're going to get it done. But right now, I can't tell you how.
But that's your big goal.
Yeah, I'd like to
next year.
Either get it open or at least have a definite plan in place to get open. And I've talked to most of the state leaders, I guess all of them, about getting it open. They're all committed to getting it done, and so I have no doubt it will be successful in the end. But it's not going to be an easy task. Never is when you're talking about money,
And a significant amount of money. I mean,
Yep.
This is not a just quick remodel and be fine.
No,
Everybody's
we're
good.
looking, for a minimum of $12 million, which is no small amount. Now, in terms of the overall state budget, not particularly large, but it's no small amount. But that's just a bare minimum. I'm not sure we can do it for that. We're probably more likely looking at it in the 20 million range as a minimum. You could go up as high as you want to. There's been talk about maybe 150 to 250 million.
When that
project.
number got thrown out, you're right. The 150, everybody was like, "Wait, what?"
Yeah, and I don't see that as a realistic option. So, but there's probably a number in there somewhere that we can get the museum open and operating on a very satisfactory basis, and is large enough to do that, but yet small enough that we can go to the state and get that somehow appropriated through the state budget.
What would you want to say in kind of closing to the people that you've represented for the last 40 years?
Yeah.
What would you want them to know?
Well, first of all, I say this not to be patronizing, but I've had the privilege of representing the greatest people in the world. And I can give you an example of that is I've 2 or 3 times this has happened. I've boarded an airplane at Love Field, and somebody will come up and say, "Thank you for representing us." And I'll be with another legislator, and they'll look at me and say, "Is that somebody just thanked you for being a representative?" I said, "Yeah, it happens a lot. People always come up and say thank you." And they say, "That never happens to me." And I said, "That's because you don't represent the people in the Texas Panhandle, because it's a special place." And I know I've had other legislators from other areas who've come up here and visited and have met with some of the people, and they always leave and they say, "You're right, this is a special area with special people. They're very unique people in this area." So to be able to represent people like that is truly a privilege. I mean, it's an honor, but it's more than that, it's a privilege. And every day that I've worked, I always tell myself, well, 2 things. One, when I go to the Texas Capitol, I look up and see that building and say, "I can't believe I'm here. This is really an awe-inspiring place." And so you never lose that reverence for that building and what it stands for, the freedom and the independent spirit of Texas. But the other thing is I never lose track of the people that you never lose track of the people you represent, what a privilege it is, and you understanding that every one of those people are counting on you to help them with something. And so, like I say, it's a big responsibility. And it puts a lot of pressure on you, and you put pressure on yourself to make sure that you're doing a good job in doing it.
Well, Representative Smithee, thank you for your service to this area. Thank you for the time, and we'll be following you over this last couple of months here and with much interest. But again, thank you for coming in today. We know that it's a busy schedule.
I've enjoyed our friendship over the years.
Yeah. I hope we still get to see each other around. And again, it has been it's like I said, when I got the email, when you do what we do for a living, you can't help but to get to know the people. And so you and four have represented the people well. And so I know that you're going to be missed. So we appreciate you for coming in.
Thank you, Andy.
All right, Representative Smithee, we've got more coming up after this. And as always, you can find more online at myhighplains.com.